You wake up every morning feeling like something essential is missing, and society tells you that missing piece is a woman. But what if everything you've been taught about masculine fulfillment is a lie designed to keep you weak? Friedrich Nietzsche understood a truth that most men will never grasp. The greatest among us must learn to stand completely alone, even if it costs them everything they thought they wanted. Today, I'm going to show you why the man who chooses solitude over romance might be the only one truly free in a world of emotional slaves. Nietzsche understood something most men never grasp. The price of greatness is radical solitude. The Übermensch doesn't emerge from the comfort of companionship, but from the forge of isolation, where ordinary men break and extraordinary ones are born. When you choose to stand alone without a woman, you're not just rejecting romantic attachment. You're embracing the fundamental loneliness that comes with refusing to be another face in the crowd. This isn't about hatred of women or relationships, but about recognizing that the path to becoming your highest self requires a kind of spiritual independence that most people find terrifying. The man who stands alone faces a brutal reality. He must become his own source of strength, validation, and purpose. While other men lean on their partners for emotional support and identity, you must forge these things from the raw materials of your own will. Nietzsche called this self-overcoming, and it demands that you become comfortable with being misunderstood, rejected and isolated by a world that fears authentic power. The Superman doesn't need others to complete him because he has learned to complete himself. This completion comes at the cost of never again being able to hide behind the comfortable illusions that relationships often provide. Every great man in history has walked this path of sacred solitude, from ancient philosophers to modern innovators. They understood that to create something truly revolutionary, you must first revolutionary yourself, and this process cannot happen while you're constantly negotiating your decisions with another person. The cost is real. You'll watch other men find comfort in partnership while you wrestle with demons that would destroy weaker souls. But the reward is becoming a force of nature rather than just another man seeking approval. You become the author of your own existence rather than a character in someone else's story. Nietzsche saw through the moral facade that society wraps around relationships. Most of what we call love is actually disguised weakness and mutual dependence. When you stand alone without a woman, you free yourself from the slave morality that tells men they must be providers, protectors, and emotional servants to be worthy of affection. Traditional relationships operate on a system of moral obligations that keep men trapped in roles that diminish their potential for greatness. You become a good boyfriend or husband by sacrificing your wild ambitions, your dangerous dreams, and your authentic self on the altar of social respectability. The man who chooses solitude rejects this entire framework and creates his own values about what it means to be powerful. Instead of defining yourself through your ability to make a woman happy, you define yourself through your ability to create, transform, and dominate your chosen field. Nietzsche believed that beyond good and evil lies a realm where exceptional individuals operate by their own moral code. This is impossible when you're constantly filtering your decisions through the lens of relationship harmony. The lone wolf doesn't ask whether his choices are good or evil. He asks whether they serve his will to power. This liberation comes with the terrifying responsibility of becoming your own moral authority. While coupled men can hide behind the comfortable boundaries of relationship rules, you must navigate the chaos of unlimited possibility. You become dangerous because you're no longer predictable. You no longer fit into society's neat categories of what a man should be. This is why most men choose the prison of conventional relationships. Freedom is more terrifying than chains. Nietzsche. identified the will to power as the fundamental drive behind all human action, the relentless urge to grow, expand, and dominate your environment. When you depend on a woman for emotional validation, you corrupt this primal force and redirect it towards seeking approval rather than achieving mastery. The man who stands alone channels his will to power inward, becoming his own source of worth, and outward toward conquering his chosen domain. Relationships often become elaborate validation machines, where men perform emotional labor to receive the approval they should be generating internally. Every moment you spend seeking feminine approval is a moment stolen from your pursuit of excellence. The will to power demands that you become comfortable with being feared, misunderstood, and occasionally hated, because greatness threatens mediocrity. When you need a woman to tell you you're valuable, you've already surrendered your power to forces outside your control. Your mood, your confidence, and your sense of purpose become dependent on someone else's emotional state. Nietzsche saw this as the ultimate weakness, allowing external forces to determine your internal reality. The lone man learns to feed off his own achievements, his own growth, and his own vision of what he can become. He transforms the energy most men waste on romantic drama into fuel for creative destruction and self-overcoming. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally dead, it means becoming emotionally sovereign. Your feelings serve your will rather than controlling it. Your need for connection gets channeled into your work, your art, your mission, rather than into another person who might leave at any moment. When you stand alone without a woman, you're forced to become the philosopher of your own existence. You can no longer borrow values from the relationship script that society hands every man. Nietzsche understood that most people never create their own moral code because it's easier to follow the herd. But the exceptional man must forge his own path through the wilderness of unlimited possibility. In relationships, men often adopt their partner's values or compromise their deepest beliefs to maintain harmony. This slow erosion of authentic conviction turns warriors into diplomats and visionaries into committee members. The man who walks alone faces the terrifying freedom of deciding what matters without external validation of his choices. You must determine your own definition of success, honor, and meaning, while everyone around you follows predetermined templates for how a man should live. This process of value creation is lonely because most people, including potential partners, will not understand or support beliefs that challenge conventional wisdom. Your values will seem extreme, dangerous, or selfish to those who've never questioned the moral framework they inherited from their culture. But this isolation births something extraordinary, a man who operates from principles he's tested in the fire of real experience rather than borrowed from books or traditions. Your values become unshakable because they're forged from your own struggle with existence. They're not theoretical concepts, but practical tools you've used to navigate the chaos of life. When other men compromise their beliefs to maintain relationships, you stand firm because your values aren't negotiable. They're the foundation of who you've chosen to become. Nietzsche's most brutal philosophical test asks whether you would choose to live your exact life infinite times with no changes. This question becomes devastating when applied to the choice of standing alone. If you had to repeat every moment of solitude, every rejection, every night of loneliness, and every achievement earned in isolation, would you still choose this path over the comfort of companionship? The eternal recurrence separates those who truly embrace their chosen suffering from those who are merely running from commitment. It forces you to confront whether your solitude serves greatness or fear. Most men who claim to prefer being alone are actually avoiding the vulnerability and risk that comes with deep connection. They're choosing the familiar pain of loneliness over the unknown pain of potential heartbreak. But Nietzsche's test demands brutal honesty about your motivations. Are you standing alone because it serves your highest development, or because you're too weak to handle the challenges of partnership? The man who passes this test can say yes to every aspect of his solitary journey, including the moments when isolation felt like a curse rather than a choice. When you can genuinely embrace the eternal recurrence of your alone path, you transform from someone who avoids relationships to someone who transcends the need for them. Your solitude becomes sacred rather than defensive. It's no longer what you're running from, but what you're running toward. This shift in perspective changes everything. You're not a man who can't get or keep a woman, but a man who has chosen something more demanding than love. Nietzsche exposed how slave morality convinces the strong to serve the weak by disguising servitude as virtue. Modern dating culture is built entirely on this foundation. Men are taught that being a good partner means sacrificing their time, energy, and resources to make women happy. This programming turns natural predators into emotional servants who measure their worth by their ability to please rather than achieve. The dating marketplace rewards men who demonstrate their willingness to be controlled through expensive dates, constant attention, and emotional availability on demand. When you stand alone, you reject the entire slave morality framework that tells men they must earn love through submission. The modern man spends his 20s and 30s proving he's relationship material by becoming increasingly domesticated. He trades his edge for approval, his mission for companionship, and his dangerous potential for safe predictability. Dating apps and social media have weaponized this slave mentality by creating endless opportunities for men to compete for female attention through displays of weakness disguised as sensitivity and care. The man who refuses to play this game appears cruel or selfish to those trapped within slave morality, but he's actually preserving something precious, his capacity for greatness. While other men exhaust themselves, jumping through hoops designed to test their compliance, you preserve your energy for pursuits that actually matter. You refuse to let your value be determined by your ability to make someone else comfortable. Instead, you become comfortable with making others uncomfortable through your refusal to submit to their emotional demands. Nietzsche warned that when you gaze into the abyss gazes back into you. This becomes terrifyingly real when you choose complete independence from romantic attachment. The man who stands alone must confront the existential void that most people fill with the noise of relationships. You face the raw silence of your own existence without the comfortable distraction of another person's needs, wants, and dramas. This abyss reveals uncomfortable truths about your motivations, your fears, and the parts of yourself you've been avoiding through the busyness of romantic pursuit. Independence demands that you become your own therapist, friend, and source of meaning, while everyone around you outsources these responsibilities to their partners. The abyss shows you exactly how much of your identity was built on external validation, and how little substance remains when you strip away the roles of boyfriend, husband, or lover. Most men discover they don't know who they are without someone else to define themselves against. This realization can trigger an existential crisis that drives weaker souls back into the safety of codependence. But those who survive the abyss emerge transformed. They've seen the worst of themselves and chosen to continue existing anyway. You develop an unshakable foundation because you've built it on bedrock rather than on the shifting sands of another person's approval. The abyss that initially terrified you becomes the source of your power. You've stared into the face of meaninglessness and decided to create meaning anyway. This makes you dangerous to those who still need external validation to feel alive. Nietzsche's famous command to become who you are requires brutal honesty about the difference between your authentic self and the performance you put on for others. Relationships often become elaborate theaters where men play roles that have nothing to do with their true nature. When you stand alone, you're forced to confront the uncomfortable question of who you actually are beneath the masks you wear to attract and maintain romantic partners. The solitary path strips away the comfortable illusions that come from defining yourself through someone else's eyes and demands that you excavate your genuine character from years of social conditioning. Most men never discover their authentic selves because they're too busy becoming what they think women want. They develop personalities designed for compatibility rather than excellence. The man who chooses solitude faces the terrifying freedom of becoming exactly who he is without compromise. This process is lonely because your true self might be incompatible with the expectations of family, friends, and society. You must be willing to disappoint everyone who prefers your false self to your authentic one. This includes potential partners who are attracted to your mask rather than your reality. Becoming who you are is a violent process that destroys everything inauthentic about your current existence. Relationships often serve as refuge from this necessary destruction. When you stand alone, you have no choice but to complete the transformation. You become a man who would rather be hated for who he is than loved for who he pretends to be. This authenticity becomes magnetic to those capable of recognizing real power, but repulsive to those who prefer comfortable lies. Standing alone without a woman forces you into Nietzsche's most dangerous dance, the confrontation with nihilism, that comes when all inherited meanings collapse and you must create purpose from nothing. Relationships often serve as meaning-making machines where men find purpose through providing for protecting and building futures with their partners. When you remove this external source of significance, you face the terrifying possibility that existence has no inherent meaning. This realization destroys weaker men, but transforms stronger ones into creators of their own reality. The nihilistic abyss reveals that all the stories society tells about love, marriage, and family are comforting fictions designed to distract people from the fundamental absurdity of existence. When you stand alone, you can no longer hide behind these collective delusions. You must either create your own meaning or surrender to the void. Most men choose relationships precisely to avoid this confrontation. They let romantic love become their religion and their partner become their god, because the alternative feels too overwhelming to contemplate. But the man who dances with nihilism and survives becomes something beyond ordinary humanity. He transforms from someone who needs meaning to someone who creates it. Your projects, your art, your mission become acts of defiance against the meaningless universe. You're not seeking purpose but imposing it through sheer force of will. This makes you dangerous because you operate from a place beyond hope and fear. You've seen the worst possible truth about existence and chosen to live with passion anyway. Nietzsche described 3 transformations of the human spirit: the camel who bears burdens, the lion who destroys old values, and the child who creates new ones. The man who stands alone without a woman must complete all 3 stages, first carrying the weight of social expectations, then destroying the romantic ideals that keep men trapped and finally becoming innocent enough to create entirely new ways of being. Most men remain camels their entire lives, dutifully carrying the burdens that relationships and society place on their backs, without ever questioning whether these loads serve their highest development. The lion stage requires you to say no to everything that diminishes your power, including the seductive comfort of romantic partnership. You must become fierce enough to destroy the values that once governed your life. This destruction is necessary, but not sufficient. Many men get stuck in perpetual rebellion against relationships without ever moving beyond rejection into creation. The lion can tear down, but cannot build. He can reject the old gods, but cannot birth new ones from his own imagination and will. The final transformation into the child represents the ultimate goal of standing alone. Becoming innocent enough to create your own games, your own rules and your own reasons for existing. The child doesn't reject relationships out of bitterness or fear, but creates something entirely new, a way of being that transcends the need for external completion. You become playful with existence rather than serious about it, powerful enough to choose connection from abundance rather than need, and free enough to dance alone in a universe that no longer feels empty. The path of standing alone without a woman is not for everyone. It's a dangerous journey that will test every assumption you have about masculinity, purpose, and what it means to be human. Nietzsche understood that most men will choose the comfortable prison of conventional relationships over the terrifying freedom of complete self-reliance, because greatness demands a price that few are willing to pay. But for those who dare to walk this path, you discover something that no relationship can provide, the unshakable knowledge that you are complete within yourself and capable of creating meaning from nothing but your own will to power. The question that haunts every man who hears this message is simple but brutal. Are you strong enough to stand alone in a world that will try to convince you that solitude is failure rather than the highest form of success? If this exploration of Nietzsche's philosophy has stirred something dangerous in your soul, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started on this journey into the forbidden territories of masculine awakening.